Recently, I had the opportunity to sit down with the developers of Legends of Aria for a 2-hour Q&A about the game. Legends of Aria is an upcoming open-world sandbox MMO that seeks to recapture the freedom and uniqueness of old-school MMOs such as Ultima Online. UO had this sort of unexplainable draw that can't quite be described unless you've experienced it, but if Legends of Aria is successful, this may be the opportunity for people who missed out on UO to see why those of us who played it are still relishing our memories of that game a full 10 or even 20 years later. The game is currently in alpha with a beta Steam early access release scheduled sometime around the end of this year. Since this is a long one, I will put time-stamped discussion points in the description if you want to skip around. You can also just keep this one on the background if you'd like to listen to the entire thing. This is an excerpt from a live stream on Twitch, so I am playing around in the background, but it's mostly just wandering through town or messing with the mob AI. 99% of the important stuff is all audio, so feel free to just listen to this one as a podcast. But make sure that you tab in when I'm getting slaughtered in the desert by an axer, because I am sure you guys will enjoy that part. I'll have a few more comments at the end of the video regarding some of these answers, but for now, here's the Q&A. Well, we got both you guys here now. Do you guys want to officially introduce yourselves and tell us a bit? I think people will particularly be interested in if you guys were involved in the development of UO or what your role was there, so you can take it away.
Just give me one. You want to start, Jeffrey, because I'm doing the featured stream.
Sure. Yeah, so my name is Biffon. Real name is Jeffrey. I've been on the team over a year now. When did I join the team? I joined the team in June? Yeah, I think I've been in the team about a little over a year now. I'm not one of the members of the team who was involved directly with Ultima Online. Supreme will be able to give you more juicy details there. I myself am just one of many people, which is something me and Morrolan probably have in common, of just adoring Ultima Online and being there back in the day and enjoying the game over the years. It's yeah, I mean, my early starts, my professional career weren't directly in gaming, but over the last 3 or 4 years, I became involved in gaming. I started off getting involved in independent projects, and then I found myself working on Darkfall in the most recent Darkfall remakes. And yeah, Ultima Online's always basically just been at the heart of my. It's kind of why I game. It kind of defined why I gamed early on. It got me into MMORPGs. My MMORPG addiction after that, which kind of has led to me making this my professional career, has always come from looking for that game again. And it never came. So yeah,
for sure.
it's I just found myself entering the industry, desperate to try and find an avenue to just bring back. The industry's long overdue the opportunity for people just to re-experience a game like that, because it's really not being served by anybody. I mean, there's a lot of games similar, and there's a lot of similar kind of veins out there, and a lot of people hitting on similar aspects and features, and there's a lot of good nostalgia going around. But yeah, the whole reason why I'm here, and the whole reason why it's kind of a perfect marriage for me getting involved with the team a year ago, was we really desperately just want to re-realize that.
Thank you.
That word that doesn't exist. What's the word?
The magic,
just
maybe?
The magic, the freedom.
Yeah, freedom. I mean, I think that's one of the biggest things that no game has ever made sense, is definitely the aspect of freedom, the aspect of going into a game and having it truly just be an open-ended sandbox where you can make your own content. Because there's a lot of games that have stuff on the side, but having that freedom be a core part of the game is pretty big. So
I got you up as the featured stream, so I can do my intro now if you like.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
All right, so I am Derek Brickman, aka Supreme. I left Electronic Arts back in 2013 to start Citadel Studios. I was co-founded, or the studio was co-founded with Tim Cotton, otherwise known as Draconi. So my history in the industry started with Madden football, believe it or not. I was a UI programmer for Madden, and got tired of the grind, releasing a new Madden every year, and so looked to transfer studios, and there was an opportunity to join the Ultima Online team. At the time, they were ramping up for everybody's favorite Ultima Online project, which is Kingdom Reborn. I jumped at the opportunity, obviously. I wasn't a huge UOer back in the day. I was an EverQuest guy. Almost dropped out of college from EverQuest. But once I started working, I don't know how I missed Ultima Online because it's right up my alley.
Thank you.
I had a little bit in college, but I was my head was so far up EverQuest, I just didn't do anything but that. But when I got on the team, oh my god, did I fall in love with the game. And so yeah, I mean, everybody knows the Kingdom Reborn project was a bit of a mess.
Remind me, because I've been through so many UO expansions and eras. Remind me what Kingdom Reborn was specifically.
Yeah. So what Kingdom Reborn ended up being was the worst Ultima Online client that ever came out.
Was that the 3D
It was.
client?
It was the best. It was the best looking.
So it was. So you had the original UO client. You had the Third Dawn client, which had the 3D characters in the 2D world. Then you had the Kingdom Reborn, which was an attempt to make it look more Baldur's Gate-y.
Okay.
More painted.
What year was that?
It was around 2005 or 2006.
Okay, I got you.
So I didn't join the team as leadership. When they were doing Kingdom Reborn, I was a lowly UI programmer when I first started, and kind of worked my way into a lead UI role. The problem with Kingdom Reborn, a little bit of the history of why it failed, was EA had acquired Mythic Entertainment, and then kind of gave Ultima Online to Mythic Entertainment, but the Ultima Online team stayed out in San Francisco. Mythic Entertainment was managing it from Fairfax. Now, this isn't confidential information; it's public. But and the trick was it's just hard to manage a remote team, so the project had its troubles. But it's where I kind of got my foothold on the Ultima Online team, and when they eventually decided, okay, this remote management thing's not working, let's move the UO team to Fairfax. They pretty much let almost the entire Ultima Online team go. They only extended offers to a select few people on the team. It was kind of their opportunity to completely clean house with the team, and a little bit may have been because of the failure of Kingdom Reborn. But I was one of the people who was extended an offer. So I moved to Virginia to work as the lead programmer for Ultima Online. The lead programmer at the time did not move, and so I took over the role. And I'll tell you, that was pretty intimidating for me, just because, I didn't know that much about how the platform and the server worked, and I had to learn it all really, really fast. And I remember the first time delivering a patch for Ultima Online. It was just a regular release. It was just a regular publish. I don't know which number it was. I could probably go back and find exactly what publish number it was, but at the time it was just terrifying for me to shut the servers down and know thousands of people that were playing are all staring at their screen going, where's this update? So yeah, I stayed as a lead programmer for a while. I kind of eventually ended up being one of the three main managers of the team, so the designers ended up directly reporting to me as well. Somebody's saying they can't hear anything. How about everybody else? It's good for everybody else, right?
Yeah, we checked at the beginning and people said you could hear.
All right, maybe
Did
just
something
a few
mess up,
people
you
are
guys?
having issues.
Oh, I guess maybe Twitch is messing up. Okay, most people in chat say that we're still good.
Okay, good. All right.
If anyone has any issues with the stream, we'll have a VOD of this later that you can watch. So don't fret too much.
Sure. So Tim Cotton was a live designer at the time, and then he also moved to Virginia with us. We were actually roommates back in San Francisco before we moved the studio, and so me and Tim got very close. And we'd always have these crazy design discussions late at night, and fast forward to 2013, the timing just seemed right for me to kind of make my exit at EA and start my own thing. Legends of Aria, which was originally Shards Online at the time, was just kind of a byproduct of all these late night discussions that Tim and I had on what the perfect game would be. We don't say as members of the team that this is the spiritual successor of Ultima Online, because we don't think it's fair to the original developers of Ultima Online. They're really the only ones that can truly claim that. But we're heavily inspired by it, obviously, and we'll be talking about that, I'm sure.
Yeah, that was going to be one of my questions, if that was your phrase or if that was someone else's.
Well, so PC Gamer called us it in like the title of they covered us one time in last alpha, and we were like, okay, if they're gonna say it, we'll share that quote, because it certainly doesn't hurt us to say it. But yeah, it comes out of PC Gamer's mouth, not ours, right? Which is awesome for us. So Legends of Aria Shards Online, we kickstarted it. We found that the Kickstarter audience really dug the content creation moddable side of the game, so we kind of went all in on that with Kickstarter. And it's still very much a priority of ours, but one of the things that we found going past Kickstarter is that the majority of the people who are coming to check this out are looking for a really killer game, and they want to know that there's going to be a killer game coming from the UO team, not the UO team, the Legends of Aria team. Right? So they want to make sure that we're delivering a good game, and so we're building the game as a priority first, with all of the you can run your own servers and mod right now if you pledge. It's kind of a high pledge level, but those people are actively running servers right now and modding them, and that is a big part of what makes our game special, but it is not the game, right? So the game is the default game of Legends of Aria, which is something that we are very committed to make sure is an excellent, awesome, fun game. And so yeah, it almost feels like sometimes we're developing two projects at the same time. You have like this core game, Legends of Aria, that's like the proof of the engine and the modding system, and then you have the moddability and the tools that kind of follow it. And so yeah, and it's really cool to watch the modders and the admins, the stuff that they do. One server has farming implemented on it already. Some guys are doing like a kind of last man standing mod, which is really cool. So there's lots of cool stuff happening in that space as well. But I'm sure you guys are most interested in the default game, so we can talk plenty about that.
Well, how do you guys see the game's population panning out? Do you think it's going to be split amongst a bunch of like custom servers, or do you think the majority of people are going to be on that main server, and that the custom servers will just kind of be like sort of how Test Server or Abyss was in UO, where people would hop on for fun every once in a while? Like, what's your vision of how those two things combine?
I feel that community servers are going to bring their own communities. I don't see a lot of the core Legends of Aria audience playing full time on community servers. Right? They all kind of tend to feed their own little audiences. Like they're a bunch of them are very RP oriented, and they plan on doing very RP focused kind of admin run events and stuff like that. And one of them is like a permadeath with kind of like hardcore rules and stuff. So I think that there are those communities out there that will play on those servers, but we don't expect it to be like a draw on the main game, because if we build an excellent game, people are going to want to play it. It doesn't matter that there are other servers out there that you can choose, right?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people draw comparisons between, say, I've had people kind of refer to it as like, they kind of get that negative idea of how kind of like free servers kind of draw away from retail servers, like paid retail servers. Whereas, I mean, it's all paid content, right? I mean, you have to own the game in order to access the community servers and the live servers. So we really don't expect there to be any draw away from a live server in that sense. And like Supreme said, I mean, all the projects we see from the community servers, there's something different about a lot of them. There's a lot of kind of Neverwinter Night inspired people there. There's a lot of anyone familiar with like the persistent worlds of Neverwinter Nights. Like that's a whole community of people who for a long time have been running very roleplay centric, very D&D style worlds, and they've got a very loyal community, and a lot of our community servers are focused on that. So
I think a good comparison would be like Arma 3 DayZ, right? DayZ mod drew thousands and thousands of people, and I bought Arma 3 so I could play DayZ mod, but Arma 3 still has its community of people that play Arma 3. right? Arma 2 was what the DayZ mod was based on, not 3, but anyway, you get the idea.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of similar to like people using, you know, like the Quake engine. They might make a mod in Half-Life 2 of the Quake engine. And most people may never have played Quake or may never have played Half-Life 2, but, you know.
Yeah, there's a lot of good examples of that. Even like, you know, Dota started off as a Warcraft 3 map, right? So
Yeah, sure.
definitely some cool things people can do.
Somebody
Well,
mentioned, well, I'll clear something up real quick. They were asking about the portal system. So you won't be able to travel from official servers to community servers with the same character. They're separate servers. Kind of like if you were to look at a list of WoW servers, you'll see, you know, a list of servers. So you wouldn't be able to just bring your character across.
Okay, cool. So what I was going to ask is, it's interesting to me, you came into the team during like the 2005 era, so that would be pretty deep into the Age of Shadows era at that point. But the game of Aria seems to draw much more heavily on like pre-AOS, even pre-Renaissance sort of UO.
Sure.
Do you guys have any thoughts on like, is there a particular era of UO that you guys are kind of after? Are you picking and choosing the best of you know, different eras? What's sort of the feel there that you're going for?
You want me to start that one, Jeffrey?
Yeah, sure. We'll both answer.
Okay. Well, so the first part of it would be that, you know, there are a lot of people who see this game and they see how it plays a lot like UO and they expect it to be UO, and it's not, right? We kind of start with a really good set of kind of inspired features, but then we very quickly depart from it and build something different. So I'll start with that, and Jeffrey could talk about how what we're building is different. And I mean, you could say that, you know, generally it's definitely before UO broke away with Trammel, right?
Right. And you guys aren't planning on implementing Trammel in this game, correct?
Not in that sense. I mean, we in this current iteration we have guard protected areas where you're just safe to adventure, and that's something that was a bit of an experiment for this release. We may tweak it for the next one, and you know, we can talk a little bit about how that's playing out too in future questions.
Is the idea as far as like safe zones and PvP, do you guys have kind of like a general philosophy that you're going for, that your implementation is going to be based around?
I can tell you that our goal was to make sure that both PvEers and PvPers could play on the same server in the same world. We didn't want to have a PvE only server and a PvP server, and it's a really tricky design challenge. And this particular release, it's working right now, right? But I feel like there is room for improvement with it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to go back to the whole, it's a good thing worth clearing up with the whole kind of dichotomy between Trammel and Felucca. I mean, they were just mirrors of one another, and I know there was some incentivization at later dates to try and make people from Trammel go to Felucca, and it did work. Was very golden periods in later UO where that worked really well. I mean, broadly not so much, but in some cases it did work really well. And we're also we kind of take that as an inspiration, and we also take EVE Online as a big inspiration as well. And what we're really trying to build towards in terms of non-consensual and consensual PvP is our kind of design philosophy around it is we really want to minimize people. We don't want to infringe people's freedoms. If someone wants to attack someone in high security, I mean, the current iteration we have now is a guard you'll pretty much get chased away or killed by guards. But what we're trying to move towards is what we're trying to realize is basically a shared map, and we want reds and blues to coexist in a map, and we want incentives between the high security and the no security areas to dictate that players can either stay in one, stay in the other, but the gameplay experience will not be the same, and the incentives will not be the same, and the opportunities will not be the same. So it's very much to create an ecosystem between those players coexisting, and that existed on UO in the early days of UI, when it was only Feluca, it was forced upon them to coexist, and it kind of worked out their own way how to survive in being in a world like that. But it always suffered from people who would grief. There was too much gaming in the grief. You could game grief quite a lot
Yeah,
in
for
lots of
sure.
different ways.
It sounds like you guys, instead of wanting to like mechanically restrict what people do, you would rather put incentives in that make it less likely for them to act out in those ways, but ultimately people still have the freedom to make their choices. Their choices are just going to have consequences.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very similar to. I always think of kind of Jita ganking in EVE Online as being a good red line, because people can be heading into the main capital city, and if they're careless and they carry an obscene amount of stuff, and they just stood outside the bank, listening to the radio whilst holding millions of gold or something, if someone wants to go out of their way to kill that person and put a serious bit of effort into it and risk the consequences, we don't want to stop people doing that. However, if you are a law-abiding citizen and you obey the laws and you play well and you exist mostly around secure areas, we want you to be not insulated from situations like that, but it shouldn't be part of day-to-day gameplay. I mean, it can happen to you, but it's a very difficult thing to achieve, and it takes kind of a lot of refining, and most importantly, it takes players being on the server and us to constantly be looking at and tweaking and reevaluating how to get that to exactly work. So, but that is still our design goal, and we're still working towards that.
Yeah, I think that's one of the major differences between this game and a lot of other quote-unquote sandbox MMOs is like, we will never put restrictions on you that are just absolutely silly, like you can't swing your sword at something if you want to, right? I mean, we have some invulnerable NPCs, and that's about the furthest we're willing to go in terms of like, breaking the sandbox when it comes to just like what you can and can't do in terms of like attacking things. We try to make your consequences make sense in game rather than just say, oh, you can't attack that.
Okay, yeah, and I like that philosophy a lot, because there's so many games that are supposed to be sandboxes, but it's like, well, you're tied into a faction and you can't attack people from the same faction, or even things like being able to attack people in the same guild. It seems like it's not a big deal, but having that extra degree of freedom has a huge impact on like your immersion and the choices that you make within the game, and just like things you can do. You can even just having the option to betray your friends. It sounds sinister, but that makes people choose their friends more carefully. It has meaningful consequences on how the game is played. It's not just queue up for a dungeon and go do it.
I'll tell you the big defining thing for games with me is the ability to communicate with my enemies. In many games that have PvP, the most you can do is like wave or like teabag them with an emote or something, right? You can't. Like some of the best conversations I've had in online games were with my enemies. And yeah, there's a lot of smack talk and there's a lot of times where you just have to mute somebody, but all the good conversations you have with your enemies, good fight, or I've actually made friends with somebody who killed me before. I mean, it's like that's just not possible in other games because they don't even let you send a tell if you want to. Well, technically we don't have tells, but you can communicate through overhead chat.
Yeah, I've had very similar experiences. Okay, well, I was going to ask this a bit later, but I'm standing in front of it right now, so I'm curious, what have you guys done with, because this is another huge feature that I think no game has really done since UO. What have you guys done with open world housing and merchants, player vendors? Can you guys talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So, again, we try to stay in the sandbox, and one of the ways you can do that is by making sure that every single item in the world has a physical representation. Most games, most MMOs, if you pick up something off of a corpse, it only exists as a sprite, a 2D sprite in your backpack. And so they couldn't even use it as a decoration if they wanted to. Those games that have housing, what they do is they let you choose from a menu of decorations that you can place, or you get access to additional decorations, but they're not actual items that you go and get in the world and bring back to your house. It's really kind of rare in today's MMO world. And then also just placing your houses in the world. I mean, that's becoming a little more common with games like Arcade. But it's still fairly uncommon to see people be able to just place a house in the world. We don't have predefined plots. So you just find an open piece of land and you just drop it down. you can actually see those houses there have little plot markers. They're the stones in the four corners, and
Oh,
that is
okay.
your
I see.
property. Yep. So if you hold control, you can actually see the overhead names, and you'll see the plot markers even more defined. But those are your edges of your property where you can decorate as you see fit. And the decorations is a little bit different from other games too, because your decorations don't necessarily follow physical rules. You can lift something up off the ground if you think it looks better that way. And people do some really creative things with that. One of my favorites was in Shards Online Alpha, the Catacombs boss was Death. We will be bringing back Catacombs, but anyway, somebody took Death's Sith and had it coming out of their house sign, like it was like stuck inside of the house sign, you know. And they did that by just kind of tweaking its position and getting it just right so it looked like that. So yeah, I mean, stuff like that is just unheard of, you know. It just doesn't exist, and yet it's so simple, but yet at the same time it's beautiful. Player merchants. These are guys that are actually looking for work in town. You go and you talk to one, and you drag them back to your house, and you say, "Okay, stand here," and they hold your money for you. So when you put some items out for sale, put a price on them, and then that merchant will collect the money when somebody purchases it. And then when at your leisure, you go over to your house and collect your money from your merchant.
Oh, I totally forgot about this, but somebody in chat asked about IDOCs, or for those of you who didn't play UO, it stands for in danger of collapse. So when people left the house unattended for a certain amount of time, the house would collapse and people would gather around to wait for that to happen, and so they could loot the house. Is that kind of thing? You guys have a version of that in Aria?
We do.
Oh, it's already been happening. Yeah, in previous. I mean, up until a short while ago in Shards Online, after the Kickstarter campaign, I mean, the servers have been open for a long time. We had very extended periods of testing. Whilst the game was in development. So throughout that time, it was, I remember, I think it was Alpha 1? It could have been pre-Alpha or Alpha 1, but was quite a few IDOCs going down, which was good fun. Yeah, it works very much as you'd expect it to.
It's a little bit simpler than Ultima Online, because Ultima Online was based on your account being active, because they had a monthly subscription. We don't, so we refresh your house when you visit it. So you just have to visit your house once. I think right now the bigger houses, you have a 30-day leeway. And you can also put in a help request to put your house into vacation mode if you're going to be gone for more than a month or something.
I really like the fact that you guys have the merchant goods literally sitting on tables on people's property. Like, UO's system was already cool where you could go up and talk to the merchant and browse their goods, but it adds another level of, I don't know the right word, but I just really like what you guys have done there. I wanted to shout that out.
Some people really go all out. I've seen houses where there's like 5 chests, and you can get an engraving tool that puts a name on the chest. And so they'll have like their armor chest, their weapons chest, and UO kind of did it. They just had different, like, you'd have like 5 different merchants. With us, you just have 5 chests and they're labeled. It's just kind of cool when you go to someone's house and you see how like neatly organized their shop is.
Yeah, on UO merchants, I used to do like bags within the bag, and then they'd leave a display item next to the bag, so you'd know that bag was swords and that one was bows. And what you can do is you can just put a sword on a table, and then you can put a wooden crate under the table, so you can have the sword as, like, you know, you can lock it down as this is the sword crate, and then I mean, you don't even need to do it. Players do it just for the ease, but I mean, yeah,
almost like a display case.
Yeah, sure. So, but you can rename chests. So, if you wanted to have a really plain shop, you could just have 10 crates. They're all named with the title.
Yeah, I'm already seeing some things people are doing with their housing and garden layouts, and it's pretty cool. Are you guys gonna have something with the actual, like, is there gonna be like a gardening or farming system of some sort, since people now have ownership of land beyond just the house itself?
There's definitely an opportunity for that kind of system, and like I said, one of the modded servers already has it. For us, it's one of those things that just needs to get prioritized in the schedule. A lot of times when we do Q&As, we have, you know, is the game going to have this? Is the game going to have this? And for us, the answer is always, of course we want that stuff, but we need to make sure that the core game works first.
So eventually, kind of, is the answer.
Yep. And one of the ones that we want to get in probably the next release is buy orders, because the game is very resource heavy, and there are some resources that can only be obtained through combat. So we need to give crafters a way to obtain those without having to beg for it in town. So that's a big one. The buy orders was one that we were disappointed didn't make it into this alpha.
Yeah, that'll basically give players the availability to these older games where you've got very localized chat and you have an absence of auction houses, it can be, you often rely on trade hubs to buy and sell, like kind of like, you know, just hundreds of people stood at the bank spamming. So we want to give players the availability to, as well as locally sell goods away from keyboard using hired merchants. We want to give players the ability to have either themselves or hired merchants take up buy orders for them. So like Supreme said, players can shift goods a lot easier. We've also got the announcement board. If you write a note and drop it on the announcement board, you can actually mark locations on the note. So if you've got a shop that's selling a certain thing or trying to buy a certain thing, if you drop it on the announcement board, you can search for it and then it'll tell you where that house is.
Yeah. One really important thing that we focus on is making sure that there is no just central auction house where you can just go and get any item you need. We want to make sure that locations matter, real estate has to matter in this game, and if you just make it where you just go to town and get everything you need, it defeats the whole purpose of having, you know, valuable real estate.
Yeah, for sure. And one of the things that Production UO did is every time, well, not every time, but many times throughout the game, they would expand new land masses rather. They would put new like housing locations for player vendors. Like Luna was a really good example of that. It's suddenly all the top housing spots from pre-AOS were kind of no longer as valuable, as everyone just did their shopping in Luna after that came out, since it was right by the Moongate. What are you guys thinking as far as like if the game servers fill up and all the housing spots get taken? Is there more landmass that's going to get added? Do you guys like the fact that that real estate is going to be scarce and people are just going to have to figure it out? What are your thoughts there?
So we have the flexibility. Our game is set up in a very dynamic fashion, in the sense that we can create alternate universes, which are essentially duplicates of the same map running in the same server. So the first one that's going to come once the player population supports it is an EU alternate universe. So you can go there as an EU player and have better latency, but you can still go to the US regions if you want to, you know, shop there or play with a US player. We'll only split the default rules off into another server if we hit a limit with our central, we call it the cluster system, but we haven't actually hit a limit with that yet. So we plan, rather than, as long as we're keeping the rules the same, we'll just add additional alternate universes to allow for more housing space.
Okay, so that's something you guys just kind of judge like as the player base grows, and then when the time comes, you might announce that a new like subset of the servers are going to be added, or a new mirror is going to be added, and then people can do another land rush.
The cool thing about it is the fact that there is flexibility there. So, you know, if we have to in the future, one of the big problems that UO had was it could never collapse. It could never go down because everyone had their houses spread out all over the place. So with the flexibility of alternate universes, there is a possibility to eventually, like, you know, combine alternate realities together to kind of, you know, if the population drops, you know, 5 years from now or whatever, you know, I try to keep the design dynamic enough that we can account for those things to happen way in the future. Because being on Ultima Online 15 years after release, we were haunted by those problems. It was like there was no way we could merge servers because people were just so stuck on their houses.
Right. So switching gears a little bit, one of the kind of, I think, knee-jerk reactions that people and even myself have had when logging into the game is some of the UI elements seem pretty crunchy. How much of that is just alpha, and how much of that is like the inventory in particular? Is this what the inventory is kind of going to look like going forward, or is that just an alpha thing that's going to be cleaned up?
Well, it's one of those things where all of the UI is in a very unpolished state right now. Our focus was getting the game done, so there's a lot of polish to be done, and a lot of that will be done based off feedback. And there's also, you'll notice that there's like kind of a gold theme UI and a purple theme UI. It's because we're in the process of moving to gold. Purple UI was our Shards Online, and so we're reskinning the UI to the gold color for Legends of Aria. So that's why there's a little bit of a color mismatch. As far as things like the backpack, it's really just going to come off of feedback from the players. You know, we do spend time, you know, making sure that we're working on the things that the general player base feels like needs the most work. So.
Okay. So I've got some gameplay questions here for you guys. The first one that I'm curious about is how you guys are handling move speed, because move speed is so core to combat in a game like this. It's basically move speed is the thing that it's kind of the anti-Zerg mechanic. It's the thing that allows smaller groups of players to fight bigger players. Um, what's your philosophy as far as like armor balance, move speed, moving in PvP in general? It seems like you guys don't want mounted combat, or at least you want to penalize it in some way. Can you kind of give us your thoughts on that topic?
I'm going to start before this is Jeffrey's territory, but one of the things I want to say, people who've been a member of the community for a long time know that things are always changing. We're always trying new things and engaging the response and tweaking them, or changing them. So where we're going right now is or where we are right now is not really necessarily what you're going to see at beta in terms of pure gameplay. But Jeffrey can talk your ear off about where he wants to see the combat go. So I'll let him start.
And just real quick, what is the timeline for beta? You guys were saying end of the year. Is that still on track?
There's a possibility it'll slip into next year. It's just something we haven't made an announcement about yet. It's what we tend to do is we do an alpha period, and at the end of the alpha period, we put the whole team's heads together and we look at what we need to do to get to where we are comfortable with beta, and then we will make a decision. So you can expect an announcement shortly after the alpha period's closed as to whether or not we're sticking to the end of the year or moving it to next year. One of the things I've always told our community is we will not launch beta unless we really feel like we're ready, because once we do final wipe, it really kind of ties our hands with certain kind of low-level system changes. So that's why we want to make sure we have it right before we put the beta tag on it, because the beta tag is the final wipe.
Beta, you mean that you guys are, the final wipe is when beta starts, or?
Yes, we will perform the final wipe right before beta starts.
Okay, so beta is going to roll into the live game then.
Yeah, so are the people who pledge to support our game now, anyone who's getting into crowdfunding gets a 1-week head start ahead of people who are buying it after release. So crowdfunding will close at some point between now and when we launch, and then only the people that got in during the crowdfunding will be getting into that 1-week head start.
Okay. You want to talk about the move speed now?
Yeah, sure. So, I should probably explain a little bit what the dynamics are in the first place that are at play, especially in terms of like PvP and group fighting. Is we are very heavily inspired by UO. We love the kind of the high skill ceiling, burst damage. If you played UO, you'll know. I mean, it's not a battle of resource pools. It's not a battle of I'm out of mana, now I'm out of stamina, now I'm out of health.
It was very reactionary. It was fast to heal, fast to die.
Yeah, exactly. It was extremely burst damagey, and you could, a warrior or a mage could reset the fight. A mage could reset a fight in 4 seconds, 5 seconds. A warrior could reset it in 9 seconds. Where we're trying to take it basically is we like those dynamics and we want to keep those dynamics. The issue which exists for us from a gameplay standpoint of how we want to change that is basically taking a little bit of the burst off. And I can explain why, but the reason why we want to take a bit of a burst off is when you distilled that the PvP down, it was a matter of who could basically synchronize their attacks the best. It was who could pinpoint their damage as a laser. And that allowed small groups to, if they had better synchronization and better team play, a group of 4 people could knock out a team of 10 like one by one. And speed was a big element. Speed was a big element in doing that. And the way that run speed currently works now is that's entirely possible. But what the second dynamic we're trying to build up here is the third dynamic is a sense of having stickier characters, and that heavily plays into the stats. And the idea of a stickier character is that if someone wanted to invest in a character who sacrificed that run speed, because having a high run speed is the way our stats work, and I think players are going to start realizing it as they get further into the game. And obviously I'm not saying that we're completely innocent here, because as alpha goes through, we do have to we're always changing it, like Supreme says, but we're not we're not demagogues when it comes to the gameplay. If we want ideas to work, but if they're not working, we're constantly changing them. So the way we're trying to get this to work is that you have stickier characters. So you have characters who have a lot more, I don't want to say crowd control, but they have a lot more ability to harass and a lot more staying power in a fight, but they do sacrifice run speed. So the players who do go heavily into run speed are going to be at a disadvantage in those sticky fights. Now, talking about that, it's like talking about two extremes, as if you're going to have extremely fast characters who are going to be a big disadvantage in an enclosed space, or people who've got no run speed but will be at a huge advantage in an enclosed space. But I think once players get into it and really, I mean, we're going to get a PvP test server up at some point as well to let players really give us some really solid feedback on it. But players are really going to be sat, in my opinion, the way we're doing it, they're really going to be sat in the middle. So the differential on run speed, when it comes to people engaging in everyday PvP and doing it quite a lot, it's, in the long run, it's not going to be very advantageous to be an extremely fast character. And that's kind of where we want it. We want the only characters who are going to have highly inflated run speed to be characters who specifically want it for specific scenarios.
What is the delta right now between someone who is like maxed out on agility and cloth armor versus someone who had no agility and heavy armor?
Right now, if the fastest someone can possibly go, I think in numerical terms, we recently tweaked the heavy armor buff, debuff to speed. So the slowest someone can go right now is just the standard speed, if we just call it 100%. And the fastest somebody can go is, I think it's about, on a multiplier, about 1.2. They have about a 20% speed increase, and that requires a full 50 points in agility.
Okay.
So the thing that, I mean, it's different until everybody kind of gets into this. I mean, we're going to be making some patches quite soon, which is really going to get people into kind of the end game. And people are going to get access to a lot of the later on prestige abilities. But I think what people are going to find is slow characters have got the highest competence in stopping other characters. So we just really want to see how that plays out.
In terms of like damage and survivability, or are you talking about like actual CC?
A little bit of everything. I mean, if you're a warrior who's got a slow run speed and you're competent in wisdom, and you've got balanced stats, the heavy armor and especially the use of a shield allows you to engage in more CC.
Interesting. How are you guys handling CC and Aria? Are you adding things like shield stuns?
Yes, it's mainly these characters who do have the CC. Like, we're not particularly fans of CC. I mean, like myself, like we don't necessarily design for the things that we just like. But I mean, my personal opinion on CC is it can be problematic in the sense that, especially when you're dealing with gank squads and you're dealing with field PvP, you have to be extremely careful with CC because more often than not, it's an I win button. And then once you get into that realm, the only ways to kind of satisfy it is by adding more. We want to add meta to the game, but we don't want to add meta versus meta. We don't want it to go down that route. We want to add a lot more meta to the warrior gameplay. But we want the same dynamics between mages and warriors to exist. Yeah, like I said, just instead of having that line drawn in the sand in a field fight where you have mages waiting, you have some really good players who are mages just waiting to extinguish someone on the other side. We wanted that extra dynamic of a character who could run up and say, I can't chase you across the map, but you can't just erase me in a drop.
Hey, I had to cut in for a second. My wife got a flat tire, so luckily it looks like you're mostly into the gameplay questions, so I can put it in Jeffrey's capable hands. Before I go, did you want to ask me any more like high-level questions, like anything about monetization, stuff like that? I got about 5 minutes.
Sure, yeah. If we want to, before we switch back into the gameplay stuff, we can go over like the business model. I probably won't take too long, but I think you guys said the game was buy to play, Steam Early Access, when beta starts, and then any subscriptions or microtransactions, anything like that?
Sure. I mean, we are very transparent about our plans because of the crowdfunded nature of the game. There's some things that we just avoid because we haven't announced yet. So I can be as candid as I can. Right now, the game is buy to play to get in. So what that means is you pay $40 and you get access to our alphas, and you also get kind of into the private forums for the playtesters. As we move forward, we'll reach a point where the crowdfunding will close, and then only people who pledge will be able to participate in some of the small focus tests. And at some point we'll open up a kind of pre-sale system before beta, to allow people to buy the game before beta launches. As far as future plans, there's lots of different ways that we can make sure that the studio is making money and affording to pay for the servers. People who know us in the community know that we're never going to just go and make this game full pay to win. We'll never kind of let you buy things that'll give you advantage in combat, PvP and stuff like that. We've never closed off the possibility of opening an in-game store. If we did do something like that, it would only be to reduce the barrier to entry for players, right? Everybody would want the price of this game to be as low as possible, so that means more people are playing. Because the more people are playing, the more successful, the more popular the game is, the more fun it is, right? The more guilds that are in, the more people playing, it just benefits everybody. So if there was some sort of in-game store, I would never do it while we're still kind of in alpha. Wouldn't make sense, right? Because we're wiping and stuff like that. So that's just stuff that's kind of down the road.
You mean selling skill boosts and things like that?
Oh, no, I was saying everybody would want the price to be lower for the game. That way we can get more people into play. So if we can lower the buy to, it'll always be buy to play. And I could see maybe there's a scenario down the road where we'd go free to play, but it's not on our plan at all. We intend to stay buy to play, but the goal would be to bring that price down a little bit. That way we can get more people in. So that would be if we did do some kind of in-game store post beta. It would be so that we can lower the price so that we can get more people playing.
And the in-game store, I mean, in these days, people are very skeptical about the direction that heads. Do you guys have any commitments as far as are those only going to be cosmetics? Are you open to the idea of an in-game store having an impact on actual gameplay? What are your thoughts there?
I would never want any items in the in-game store that would affect player versus player combat. And we definitely don't want things that will allow people to kind of corner markets, buying gold and stuff like that.
Right.
So yeah, we're definitely going to be avoiding anything like that. And also, we're very close with our community. So anything that we do, we're not just going to drop it on them and go, guess what? You guys are screwed. It's going to be something. It's going to be a collaborative effort. So.
Yeah.
Okay.
And also, it's a very unique kind of game in the sense that, it's quite a unique genre. I mean, it's difficult to say in the sense that some of the items because I remember we always reference for a period Ultima Online did advanced characters that you could buy, and you could buy characters which were 70 skill here there, and it didn't really. I mean, there's certain things you can do and can't do, but yeah, our line is we'd never influence PvP performance. We'd never influence. We wouldn't influence actual in-game things that you'd be able to get in-game. We wouldn't monetize them so you can get them quicker. I think we see eye to eye with pretty much the community on that one.
Okay.
Did you have any other questions for me, Morrolan, before I took off?
I think that's probably it as far as the business side of things.
I will put Jeffrey at your mercy.
Cool. Thanks for hanging out.
I'll do my thing before I go. Everybody, this game's crowdfunded. So the reason why Morrolan's running around this world right now with all these other guys is that it's possible because of everybody who's helped pledge support to the project. So I just throw that out there. If you pledge, not only are you getting access to the game, you're helping us make a better game. So every single pledge that we get means that the game will be that much better when we launch beta. So, and we also welcome, it's not just your money, right? It's your feedback as well. It's you getting in the game and helping us make a better game. If you jump into we have a community Discord. It's community run Discord server, but the devs hang out in there. And if you hang out in there for just a few days, you'll see that it is very much a collaboration between us and the people who've crowdfunded. And I'm sure Morrolan can speak to that as well. So yeah, and I'm sure Morrolan has his referral link somewhere in here. So yeah, help us make this thing better.
Cool. Thanks again, man.
All right. With that, I will talk to you later.
All right. Speak soon.
All right, so back to the kind of
The
gameplay
nitty-gritty.
and PvP side of things. So we're talking a bit about move speed and characters kind of picking and choosing if they want to be, as you said, like stickier or if they want to move faster. You
Sure.
guys have added warrior special moves, and it kind of reminds me of like the special moves warriors had in AOS. Um, what is there anything else that you guys have done to warrior PvP to kind of make it more? Because warrior PvP in old school UO is pretty much just 99% positioning, and then like make sure you click your potions. Are you guys working to kind of flesh that out and make that more complex?
Sure. Well, a big difference from this alpha to the last is the melee combat system was changed completely. It was designed at the core to the way we looked back at the combat, say from Alpha 2, is like I said, we always have a fondness for the dynamics of mage PvP, and not just in PvP. We love the way that the Ultima Online style mage works. I mean, it's so unique. It's so open, and it's just something that's very special to this genre. So
There's a ton
we've
of
kept
decisions
mages
to
are very
make in a fight with
sure,
mage
yeah.
versus mage.
Yeah, mage versus mage is exactly the same. It's it's sweaty palms and having a stroke whilst you're doing it. It's because right now mages interrupt mages 100% of the time on any cast. So a mage versus mage fight is just like a very, very reactive, highly intense slapping competition, and it's just they're very, very adrenaline fueled. We wanted to keep that in its entirety. But the warrior combat, like you said about warrior combat in UO, was basically it was jousting and refreshing a 10-second heal timer and timing your potions, and that was it. And we took an open license on as long as combat was meeting the same, fulfilling the same role and reaching the same level of relative balance. We just wanted to make combat a lot more fun and a lot more modern as well. And yeah, so we basically changed it. So I mean, I'm not sure if you've played a melee character yet, but the hit chance has gone up incredibly. The hit chance has almost doubled. We no longer operate on this hit and miss mechanic anymore. We re-implemented critical hits. Critical hits now take the place of interrupting mages over just standard hits. So you've still got that same kind of 50-50, well, it's a little bit less now. You've still got that opportunity to interrupt mages as a melee character.
So a standard hit won't interrupt, but a critical hit will?
Yes. So that allowed us to get rid of a lot of the obsolescence around warrior characters. I mean, you'll know that what it felt like to start a warrior at 0 combat skill back in the day.
So it used to be in UO that when you had equal skill to your opponent, it was basically 50 hit, 50 miss.
Yeah.
What does it feel like nowadays?
What it feels like now, to put it in that scope, the base hit chance right now is about 90%.
Oh wow!
And depending on, you get a bonus to your accuracy based on your weapon skill. So everybody kind of scales up with each other. So you're now looking at generally 90% hit rate if you're hitting someone of equal skill. There's a bit of variation between the weapons. Daggers hit the least, but crit the most. Swords hit on average the same, crit pretty averagely. Maces crit the least, but hit the most. And I mean, that's just a bit of differentiation between the weapons. They're all kind of balanced within each other. So you're looking at like about a 90% hit chance. And then critical hit rate depends entirely on your agility. So that's another of the contrasts we have with people who want to play more sticky characters and people who want to play faster, more aggressive characters. Is characters who use daggers and bows are going to be hitting a lot more crits. So depending on how you build your warrior, he's going to interrupt a mage more or less. So the dynamics of how they do damage differ depending on how you build them.
Okay. And what sort of, so we mentioned the special moves so far. Is there any other additional mechanics you guys have added to warrior combat? Any other key presses or anything?
No, we should probably talk about prestige abilities, because that's essentially
yes, that was definitely on the list.
Yeah, prestige abilities are essentially where warriors and mages. Mage prestige abilities differ a little bit because they're not direct abilities. They normally supplement the spells we already have. But warrior abilities come from prestige abilities. Prestige abilities are our means of allowing players to. It's quite unique, really, because it's not essentially like a talent system because it doesn't have as much depth as that, but it's essentially allows players to, as you kill monsters in game, you accrue a sort of experience, and then you can spend that experience on prestige abilities which have certain prerequisites depending on your template. But I think a given prestige trainer, say if you visit the knight trainer, about half of these abilities will have quite specific requirements. So it'll be like shield bash, but that will require blocking. It'll require heavy armor. You might have charge, which also has quite heavy prerequisites, which is our way of kind of balancing the meta between different characters. But all prestige trainers also have very general abilities as well. So it's not hard for a lot of characters to visit the rogue trainer and pick up dart, which is like a short kind of impact speed boost. So it's kind of a way to add more definition to people who build more pure characters, and at the same time, it gives all characters a wider range of abilities to choose.
And so the prestige system, I haven't seen much of it. I saw my character getting prestige experience, basically, do you get a certain amount of experience, and then if you have the prerequisites, you can go cash that experience in to unlock like a prestige ability? Is that essentially how it works?
Yeah, that's exactly how it works.
If you unlock like a knight prestige, does that block you from getting a rogue or a mage prestige in any way?
No, not at all. All you need to do to get any given prestige ability is there are prestige books. Some of the earlier ones and some of the easier ones you can buy in the general store. But all the other books, they go up to 3 levels. So you can level up a prestige ability from level 1 to 2 to 3. And that simply just requires more experience and higher prerequisites. So everyone at the end of the day will have 3 level 3 prestige abilities.
Okay.
And yeah, as long as you meet the prerequisites and as long as you have a book, you can mix and match, which is kind of what makes it exciting to use in PvP because, we haven't even started to scratch the surface of some of the builds. I mean, we can test so much and we can play around so much internally, but it's kind of really fun to see people are making some crazy things, which is why alphas are good to balance it.
I wanted to talk to you actually about build variety. I was looking at the way, so you guys limited, in UO you used to have 7 skills that you could max out. In Aria you have 6. Now you guys have rebalanced a lot of skills so that number has a different meaning. But I'm still, I'm looking at like the way that's, the amount of skills you'd have to choose to say build a mage. There's basically, it seems to be 5 core skills that you kind of have to have if you want to be a mage. Which doesn't really leave room, that 6th skill, if you were to like be a mage who also uses swords, you kind of can't do that since swords require 2 skills. Are there some mage skills that aren't as mandatory as I think they are, or are you guys not wanting like the tank mage kind of builds to exist? What are your thoughts there?
Well, one of the big changes that we did, we got rid of a lot of mandatory skills which existed before. Before, if you had, say, 10 skills in your warrior abilities, and you were holding the best sword in the game, you wouldn't do very much with it at all. Whereas we've switched now to, instead of having a lot of your character's innate damage being on the character, we switched it onto the item, and we've switched around a lot of skills to be access to that item.
Interesting. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, that's probably the biggest change. So if you think that mages used to have channeling, that was the bulk of their damage. If you had no channeling, you did no damage. We've actually switched it around so that magic affinity is a skill that you gain whilst casting spells. It's kind of your proficiency with your staff. And now staffs essentially fulfill the purpose of what channeling used to. So by doing that, it allows us to, it's a new kind of way of, it kind of adds an item progression for the early game, because I mean, one thing looking back at our past alphas and our past new player experiences, and especially if you go back all the way to UO, when UO started, everybody was playing UO, and they were leveling their skills as they explored, and it was a very slow, gradual process, and everybody was having fun and enjoying it. But it very quickly became a min max. I mean, anyone who ever played UO knew that if you ever went back to UO, they would, they'd do something silly, like they'd craft shields and sell them to make gold, and then just macro their magery up and just skip the entire start of the game. So a lot of our changes have been, it kind of looks like an itemization, but it's not. The idea is we wanted to give a meaningful sense of progression around items for players as they progressed through the early stages of the game and progressed through to late game. But once you get to late game, the items function very much how they used to. So it's just us changing the dynamic.
That I could, as my 6th skill on my mage, I could pick up, say, slashing. And even though I wouldn't have vigor for the damage bonus, I could still get a high-level sword and do a decent amount of damage with it.
Sure. But yeah, that's exactly how it works.
What is kind of the incentive for leveling something like slashing if the base hit rate is already 90% though? Is it more crits?
It's the prerequisite behind using a higher grade of sword.
Okay, I see. So you can't use those good weapons if you don't have the slashing to equip them.
Yeah, it's kind of it's a strange thing to explain to somebody who knows how it used to work, because it's essentially saying you have to level up your slashing in order to equip what would have been previously your melee skill. So yeah, if you're a 5x mage and you fulfill all those mage skills, the basic difference is if you take GM slashing, you can still absolutely function as a hybrid character. The main difference is the vigor skill allows us to differentiate between who's a pure warrior and who is a hybrid mage, in giving the warrior some damage giving the warrior an advantage for being the pure warrior. So it's not a huge advantage, it's a slight advantage, but it's still entirely possible to...
What sort of advantage is GM vigor or GM channeling for a warrior and for a mage? Like, is there a straight formula for how much more damage that gives you?
There is. What would it be off the top of my head? Off the top of my head, I can tell you.
Yeah, because in old school UO, like eval int, which is basically what channeling in Aria, was at least half of your damage from spells, maybe more. I mean, it was a huge difference. Like having just mage by itself would basically mean you could only do defensive spells. You couldn't actually do any damage.
Yeah, absolutely. If you had GM magery and no evaluating intelligence, it's the same with us in Alpha 2. If you had GM evocation and you had no channeling, it's another one of those things we kind of wanted to get rid of, because it was entirely possible then to build a template and take, say, slashing but not take melee, and you just kind of leave yourself in trouble. We wanted to, like, if someone plays the game and through playing the game they accrue skills, we wanted just to try and remove the opportunity for people to just get rid of arbitrary skills, because
right,
it just kind of makes more sense.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot more sense now that you've explained it, because the skills like vigor or channeling wouldn't be mandatory. I mean, even on my mage here, I could decide to take slashing and vigor and drop channeling, and my magic wouldn't hit as hard, but maybe I decide on some balance between my casting and my swing speed so that I can actually make like a true hybrid.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things I was trying to figure out the other day, which I hadn't actually tried in game yet, was having a hybrid mage with something like archery, and then not taking vigor, but with my stat allocation, because strength is quite a strong determinant of damage as well. Taking like a high strength mage who dropped vigor, because you can kind of make up the loss, but you have to suffer the burn somewhere else. So yeah, it's entirely possible that it's less so with channeling, but channeling offers a bonus, but it offers a slight increased bonus than, because if you allow mages with evocation or no channeling to do a lot of damage, it can be quite brutal. But yeah, I think on average our attack rating doesn't directly translate to damage. It goes through a calculation, so you kind of have to base how much attack you have based on the damage you're actually doing to a monster. But if you've got GM Vigor, you're looking at about something like 10 to 20% damage increase.
So significant, but not mandatory.
Yeah, not the end of the world by any means, especially if you're a mage.
Yeah.
Because it's also worth noting that the mage has got an attack buff, which increases your attack rating by 10. So you can almost satisfy it. Nearly.
So the staff system, I can cast with the staff out. I haven't really tested this yet. Am I not able to cast with other sort of weapons? Have you guys done any rebalancing there?
Currently, the same way we've moved your damage largely off your skill and onto your equipment. We've done the same with channeling and power. If you look at the staff you're holding, it'll have a power and a force rating.
Yeah.
Your force rating is the influence behind your healing spells. Now, the force implementation and the restoration implementation is one of those things that, like Supreme said, we like to experiment, and we wanted to see if we could draw a distinction in the game between healer type characters and between mage type characters. We don't want to separate them. We wanted to, we're trying to play with this dynamic to see, is there room in this type of a game for someone who wants to specialize in healing above specializing in damage? So that's something that we're like getting community feedback on, and we're just seeing how it goes. So,
okay. So that's something that's still kind of in the works.
Yeah. I mean, we do try things because, I mean, especially in this type of game, I mean, these games don't come along very often. So it's kind of unique to kind of see what you can do inside of them. And we want to exhaust as many opportunities as we can before we actually... we're very proactive in testing our designs.
Do you guys restrict spellcasting based on what's equipped? Like if I have a sword in hand instead of a staff, can I no longer cast?
You can cast. It will just not have... Just don't get the power bonus, which is it's your strongest determinant in damage.
Interesting.
It affords us the ability to start moving power over to certain weapons, because that gives us a lot more it gives us a lot more opportunity for hybrid characters.
So you guys are thinking about making hybrid weapons too then, where you could have a weapon that was like split between physical damage and power, and you could have some kind of mixture there? Is that what you're going for?
Yeah, that's exactly it, yeah.
Okay. Can you explain briefly so you guys have 6 stats. Strength, it seems like melee damage. Agility is like run speed and maybe swing speed. Is that also the case?
Yeah, I can go through them for you. Strength, I mean, the vast majority of them are pretty simple. I mean, agility does a few things, but it's kind of a reason. Strength is primarily governs weapon damage. I think around 30 strength, around 30 to 35 strength, you're doing what we would deem was 100% of your normal damage. And then it starts scaling up and down either side of that. So if you drop below around 30, 35 strength, you'll start doing 100%, let's say. Agility is a catch-all for quite a few things, which kind of goes into how we're trying to change a few dynamics around character movement and stickiness. Agility, the most obvious effects of agility is your crit chance, your run speed, and your evasion. Evasion seems less pronounced because the swings are quite quick now, but obviously if you evade a hit, it's quite a big deal, and it depends who you're fighting. If you've got high evasion and you're fighting an archer, I mean, they hit quite hard, so if you evade a crit from an archer, then it's a good thing. But yeah, agility is mainly looking at your crit chance and your run speed and your evasion. I got confused thanks to paper doll. I forgot all of our stats.
So intelligence, probably mana and spell damage?
Intelligence is just primarily given the size of your mana pool. And it also has a slight bonus to your mage damage as well.
Okay, but not the kind of thing where you need to max your intelligence if you want to do damage?
No. The curves we've used for our stats, it's not all stats, but the curves that we use for our stats are specifically middle loaded. So they punish you severely for being low in that stat, and you only get marginal gains at the ceiling. And the ones that applies to are intelligence and constitution. So, is it intelligence constitution? I think it's strength and constitution. So basically, the way that they kind of work together is that if you start min-maxing your stats and say you go for 50s in strength to try and maximize your damage, or if you try and go 50 intelligence, or if you try and go 50 agility for run speed, people will slowly kind of see that, particularly in PvP, if you're a PvEer, you can probably get away with, this is where the magic resistance, the old duo style magic resistance factor comes into play, because if you're a PvPer in old duo, you kind of needed magic resist to be competitive. And that now kind of exists captured within our wisdom and our will stats. So your wisdom stat translates straight as magic resistance. So the higher your wisdom, the greater your chance of resisting a spell. So when you resist a spell, you basically take half damage from that spell. And then will's kind of a catch-all for the old kind of Dungeons and Dragons style stat. I can't remember which one it was, but it's basically going to be your defense against CC. So if you min-max your, we call them primary stats, your strength, agility, intelligence, constitution, and you run out with 10 wisdom, 10 will, as a PvPer, you're going to really struggle, because the more sticky characters are going to CC you into oblivion, and you're not going to survive dumps from mages very well, because wisdom's kind of a requirement there. So it's about middle loading the stats, and I think when people get into PvP, and start becoming
people need to have like some reasonable amount of those stats, unless they want to be punished, but they don't need to really max them out unless they're trying to specialize. Sure.
I mean, if you it boils down to the character customization, really. You can roll with really high will, and it doesn't rock paper scissors you, but it gives you more of a pronounced advantage against people who use stuns. And if you roll out of really high wisdom, you can become a little bit of a mage killer, but it just does come at a cost to your other stats.
It seems like you can, as far as melee damage goes, you can straight up hit someone while moving, but with archery, there's a timer where you need to stand still. Does that vary from melee weapon to melee weapon, or is that just across the board the case?
Yeah, archery features, it's very unique in how it works. We've actually got, I'm in the middle of doing some tweaking to the archery damage, but the logic behind archery is that it's going to be a very, very hard hitting skill. It's going to be very unreliant upon any special abilities. It's basically going to be a very hard hitting, high damage skill, and that's reflected in the fact that you have to stand still to shoot with a bow. And it's also a balancing factor of, you can still engage in PvP and you can still engage in combat from mounted. And it's a very important aspect of balancing archery in that sense, because it's probably the worst thing you can really game is, the way we're implementing archery. And once we get this tweak out to their damage, it's gonna really show. But mounted archers with the damage they're going to be doing would be insane. So
you guys made it so that mounts take damage when the player riding them takes damage, or something along those lines. Are you thinking that mounted combat, it's going to be the sort of thing where if someone wants to ride in on a mount, they're going to risk getting that mount killed?
It's a bit of both. During the second alpha, during Alpha 2, we had like 100% mounted combat. And the things that came obvious to us in Alpha 2 was that we needed to step up the meta a little bit of the abilities. We were suffering a little bit too much from that old school combat problem, where combat wasn't engaging enough, it wasn't immersive enough. It was a lot of the old jousting, right?
Right.
And we decided we had to change combat. We had to make combat something that was a lot more engaging, and just a lot more engaging for characters. So
are you thinking that most combat is actually going to happen on foot, or do you see people still jousting on and trying to do damage from horseback? How do you think it's going to play out?
Well, one thing that the mount does inherit from a rider is his armor. So there's a dynamic at play where the more sticky characters will last a lot longer on a mount, as opposed to, say, a mage on a mount or an archer. So we're currently, it's a tweaking process with mounts to get them to where we want to be, because obviously we could have mounts drop straight away, or we could have mounts drop a little later. in an upcoming patch, we are going to be increasing the health of horses. So once you tame a horse, it's going to get a health bonus, in addition to inheriting your armor. So where we want horses to be is, instead of adding kind of arbitrary dismount mechanics, we want the dismount mechanic to be the death of the horse. So where we ideally want it to land, and we're going to keep tweaking it to try and get it there, is that you can engage in PvP on a horse, and you can use a horse to run down enemies, and you can not sacrifice the horse, but you can risk the horse to use that horse in combat. But if someone's going to sit down to a pitched battle, we would prefer the pitched battles and the dungeon fights and the real encounters to not be mounted.
So I noticed that cast speed is doubled on a horse. Are there any other disadvantages to being mounted?
You can't use any combat abilities on a mount.
No special attacks if you're a warrior?
Nope.
Okay.
Yeah, if you're chasing someone on a mount and then you pop a charge, you'll jump off and it'll complete the charge.
Interesting, okay.
So that's the thing. We almost want that to play into the run speed dynamics of the game. Like, we want horses to feature in combat, absolutely. We don't want them to be like the World of Warcraft mount that you get off and put in your bag.
Right.
But we don't want, and we want the majority of serious encounters to take place on foot.
Okay, I had a follow-up question to that, but now I've spaced on it. I want to talk a little bit about the world of Aria a little more. So, how about fast travel? What are you guys' thoughts on that?
Fast travel's a funny one because it's not something we've got. It's not something we've got an overarching design philosophy on, because we're starting from a place of less is more, and we really don't know how the world's going to shape up yet. I mean, we know how we would like the world to shape up, and we know how, like from past experience of games, which is similar, how the world might shape up. But we're just taking a position of less is more right now, and right now we have teleportation towers, which have a gold cost attached to them, which we are, like, every patch we're reducing it a little bit to get people to start using them, because we didn't want them to be for free. But right now we're basically just giving
So that
players...
would be like a moon gate from old school UO?
Yeah, just like a moon gate. So we're giving players the opportunity to get around the map as they need to, but we haven't reached kind of a firm decision on precisely what is, in terms of kind of like recall and gate travel. Right now you can bind to a half in a inn, and you can use the recall scroll, or you can use the bind portal scroll, or the spells to recall and bind portal between halves in towns. So you have a bind location. But we're quite happy to leave it there until we
Yeah, it's an interesting balance to strike, because I've played so many different eras of the game and so many different player run servers that had different rule sets. And one of the things that I think spoiled me from actual production shards is later on, like when power scrolls were introduced, they killed your ability to recall or gate into dungeons or champion spawns.
Yeah.
And so I got so used to, once you were in an area where a large fight was likely to break out, or where there was like some sort of high stakes loot that people were grinding, I got so used to people not, they would have to run away from you. They couldn't just teleport out. And so then after I would go, play an old school player run server where they would use the old rule sets, and I'd walk up to someone in like, level 4 dungeon deceit farming lich lords, like a really high level spot, and they would just see my name on the edge of the screen and instantly recall, and it's like, I didn't even get a chance to attack them before that happened. Yeah.
Well, that's a funny thing. I mean, my own experience, like you with UO and UO free shards, and especially with Age of Shadows, with them banning fast travel in some places and allowing it in others. I mean, from like my own personal gaming perspective, that was like that was the best time for me, was when in the general world you had fast travel, and then in the high stakes areas you had none, because it kind of gives you the best of both, right?
Yeah, and I think that was a good balance in the Power Scroll era of UO, because people could still get around and react to things quickly. Like if you said, I need help in this dungeon, people could go there, but they still had to actually move through the dungeon and get to where the specific fight was.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was a really good balance.
once you completed the thing and you got your reward and you realized you had to leave with it as well, it was great. And it's just one of those things. We like I said, less is more is where we're going from, because as soon as we add fast travel, it's something very different. It's very hard to take it away. It's the same approach we're taking with mounts. Once we set a precedent that mounts are the thing, it's going to be very hard for us to take it away. So I think we just want to let it mature. Obviously, we're only in alpha right now, so we're going to let it mature from now through to beta. And I think when we get around beta time, we're going to know. We'll know a lot more about how it's going to work out specifically in our game. We just don't want to make any, you know.
How do you guys feel about the size of the world? We talked a little bit earlier about how if the player base ever exceeded, you guys could make kind of like a mirror of the same world. Would that be your default reaction, or would you guys want to add like kind of expansion style additional land masses? I guess the current state of the world, like how long would you say it takes to travel from one end to the other? And are you guys happy with the current size of the world? Are you trying to make it bigger before beta? What are your thoughts on that category?
As far as we're concerned, the world's huge. Like when you get in game, especially the way that the map has been built, I mean, it's like a vast landscape. I think getting from top to bottom takes. I remember Supreme did it recently. I think looking at the map, to go from the top part of the upper plains to the bottom, to the most southwesterly point of barren lands, which is the desert. So to get from a kind of just below the frozen tundra all the way to the bottom left, I think on a mount took about 20 minutes.
Okay, yeah, that sounds about right. Because like running from, I forget the name of this town, but running from this town to the desert is probably like a good 5-minute run. So if you were to multiply that by 3 or 4, yeah, you'd have quite a ways to go.
Yeah, so it's, to us, the size of the map for the scale of the world, we think it's about right. I mean, for us, the map was a huge undertaking for us when you consider the size of the map like a year ago. I guess what we feel mostly about the map right now is we realize how much work, like there's still a lot of work we need to do on the map. Like we have the map and we're very, very happy with the size and the scale of it, but we know how much detail has to go into the map, and we know how much we're in a position now where we have to start putting the real identity and the real lore and the real character back into the map. So yeah, talking about the map, our biggest concern of the map right now and what our world designer and artists can be really busy with is just really fleshing out as much of a map as possible, because we want more cities and we want more. It'll really benefit from more kind of recognizable areas. I think between now and beta there's going to be a real kind of polish going on the map.
Is housing open everywhere, like even the tundra, the desert, or are there restrictions on where you can drop a house?
Right now, there's no restrictions on where you can drop a house, other than the obvious places like around dungeon entrances and too close to cities, things like that. The top 3 areas, you got the Barrens on the top left, you've got the other Barrens, the Outlands on the top left, the Frozen Tundra on the top right, and we have a third region which is on the top right. They're currently closed, and we're hoping we're going to get those in on the launch of the beta. But we've also kind of got super secret cool plans for them as well, so you have to wait for us to confirm that. So we can't really comment precisely on that in terms of housing or in terms of other things, but those land masses will be coming, and they may have something super cool about them. And I didn't answer your last question, which was regarding what we do if the servers get gets full. If a server gets full, like Supreme said, we have the ability to create mirror worlds, and we love the idea of creating mirror worlds for different regions. It's kind of great that you can connect, the Oceania servers and the European servers and the NA servers, because you can shop across. You can shop across like global markets, if you will, and that's great. But in terms of kind of like localized, if we get a really, really full NA server or a really, really full European server, it kind of incentivizes us to start thinking about increasing the size of a landmass. And obviously one solution is just to create mirrors of the worlds and create new servers, and we have a benefit of those being connected, unlike other online MMORPGs where there's no connection between the servers, and there's like paid transfers and things like that. But it would do both. It would incentivize us to create new servers, and at the same time, it would probably make us start thinking about the landmass size as well, if it was worth creating the bigger area.
So the world is obviously going to have things like orc camps and dungeons and static areas that will be points of interest. Do you guys have any dynamic points of interest? Someone in chat mentioned treasure maps, treasure hunting. Is that in the game, or will it be in the game?
Yeah, we have systems in place. Some of our testers will know, but these things have featured in the last test and the test before. We currently have systems in place for fishing treasure maps. We have kind of standard land treasure maps as well. And we've also this alpha we've been working with a dynamic camp spawn system as well, which you'll see it featuring around the world actually. You'll see them especially in the more contested areas outside of upper plains and the southern hills. But we really, that's one of the things which is really going to come into play between now and launch, is we really want to have very dynamic opportunities to engage with content, because as we start fleshing out the map and including more and more content and more points of interest, and once we really start fleshing that out, we need very interesting and unique ways to get people going to those places, because we're not huge questers. We don't place very much faith in quest-driven content. So
Right.
we're constantly thinking up ways, new inventive ways to get people interacting with the world, but in an immersive and very voluntary way.
It's...
Sorry,
go ahead. I was gonna say with the sorry, I was gonna say with the structure of the map, just kind of taking a glance at it, it seems like there's basically one continent and everything is connected by foot. Boats were an incredible, unique part of UO. Do you guys have plans for that part of the game?
Yes, we do. It's a shame. The shame Supreme's not here to talk about it, because when everybody asks him about boats, he gets nervous, because it's something that we want to put in, but it's just one of those things which just, it's going to require a little bit of work. So it's something that we're like kind of unofficially committed to putting in, and I think once we get closer to a position where we can really knuckle down on things like that, but we'll probably commit ourselves to it. It's something we really want to see.
And at that point, if you guys were to add boats, I'm assuming you'd probably like add places to go, maybe some islands or some cities out in the water, or some points of interest.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. Cool. So let's see. I've got some economy questions for you. We can dive into that. One thing that I know a lot of people will be interested to hear about is the role of crafters in Aria. For example, do you guys have an idea of if the best items gear-wise are going to be mob dropped or player crafted, or is there going to be some balance between those two?
Sure. Well, we think it's going to be a thing about... I think our way of dealing with it, particularly at the end game, is to differentiate particularly what we do. We're a very, very player-driven economy-based game. We place a lot of importance in the whole range of professions contributing. We want everybody contributing. We want chefs, fishermen, tailors, carpenters, blacksmiths. We want everybody... Oh, my cat just bit me. We want everybody contributing in a similar way. So the aspiration with the crafted items, obviously with the more sandboxy crafts, is just that the cooking items will be required to some degree to get you through the game. Carpentry obviously has its place, will have its place in housing and in furniture and things like that. But for the actual kind of the warsmiths, the people who make the armor and the weapons, we want the best crafted gear to be the staple which people use, and we want to give crafters the opportunity, if they have the material resources, because some of the more rarer stuff will become from more rare mob drops, or we've also got plans to create like a more of a system for crafters to kind of complete work in the city themselves, and more have like kind of a set of tasks they can do to engage in high-end content without... We don't want to make crafters go fight dragons and things like that.
Right.
But we want crafters to have the opportunity to create really powerful and rare items, but we also want players to be able to get those from monsters and bosses as well. So I think there's going to be a parity between what you can get from crafted and what you can get from mob dropped in terms of their usefulness, but they will differ in their applications. So you might get more kind of, you know, we've always wanted to put spell effects on weapons again, like, you know, a sword which has got a chance of like proccing the lightning or something like that, and that's something that we put on mob drops, whereas the blacksmithing items will be a little bit more straightforward with the opportunity to like enhance them. And so yeah, I'd say it's about 60-40 weighted in terms of crafting.
Okay. Do you guys have any plans for like a dynamic gathering where someone could go out and gather like a special type of metal or timber that would create more powerful items from that?
Yes, it's actually sat in the rocket bay waiting to be deployed on the server. We already have got different kinds of materials in game. We got, I think it's 4 tiers of metal, 4 tiers of leather, 4 tiers of leather, 4 tiers of cloth, 4 tiers of iron, and 4 tiers of wood. They're going to be patched to the server very soon, definitely by this weekend. The recipes are going to get a big patch as well for anybody listening who's testing. And these items are geographically dispersed around the map, so if you want to get your hands on the best metals and the best resources, you're going to have to leave our high security zone.
I'm lost again.
So yeah, absolutely. It's going to be one of those. We kind of love the idea
Where's my horse?
of placing the risk versus reward on getting these rare materials. It's kind of a bit like EVE Online in that sense, that you have to risk some to obtain them. But we do want to add more. I mean, we're looking at like 4 tiers of kind of. I gotta stop saying tiers. We're looking at 4 different qualities of like of ores and things like that. We'd love to take it up to 6 or 8. But
I'm really curious. I'm really curious. You mentioned. I think I'm being attacked. You mentioned the. Oh, I'm getting stunned too. You mentioned things like carpentry and furniture.
Yeah.
How will, like, what is going to be the late game content for, we're going down, boys, what's going to be the late game content for things like carpenters? Is it going to be cosmetic stuff for people to put in their houses?
Sure. Well, right now, in what is currently available from the noise down.
I know, I couldn't even run away from that guy. Maybe I should have switched to light armor.
Nah, Twitch sniped. Well, between carpentry, and it's the current access you have right now is our old testers kind of hate us when it comes to furniture, because when we were in earlier development, the kind of a status quo as new carpentry and furniture assets kind of reached the game was just to put them in game so people could see them and people could try them out. And as we've got steadily closer towards being done, we pulled a lot of those from the game because we want to repurpose a lot of the furniture. We want to repurpose a lot of redecorations because they've got applications across the board, because we can use them as rewards in lots of different places. We can use them as rewards for for boss drops, for monster drops, for treasure chests, for fishing. And we've got so many of them. It's really going to play into our kind of more cosmetic item economy. So yeah, if you're familiar with WoW and you realize how much that rares and things like that really had an impact on the late game economy, which makes no sense, but it still happens.
It's always something I have trouble explaining to people who never played.
Yeah, you can't. It's so hard to do. It's like, yeah, in UO you play for a couple of years and you amass loads of money, and then you spent it on like sandals and baskets of fruit and stuff, so you could put it in your house.
Yeah, exactly. Or like a certain type of fur that didn't exist anymore that people use as a rug.
But it's a really magical it's a really magical thing, because you
there it is. God,
in a lot of games a lot of games suffer from inflation, and there's loads of kind of things you can, artificial ways you can try and fight back against that. But the weird thing that UO did was its way of dealing with in-game inflation, and its way of dealing with age and just the increment in wealth was people just started trading. Like, everyone became an art dealer, and people were trading very rare items and very rare cosmetic items and very rare pieces of house furniture for millions and millions. And it, in a way, it kind of, it kind of became like the stock exchange. And like, if you think of how much real money there is in the world versus how much financial money there is in the world, they just kept playing with all that excess money. And it made it especially interesting because as soon as you kind of got into that trade, you could make a lot of money off being nothing but a trader. And it was it was just insane.
Yeah, regardless of whether it was magic weapons or rares, or you could totally just be 100% merchant in that game, and that's where you could make all your money. Never had to step foot outside of town.
Yeah, well, UO is the only game to this date that I've seen at least 4, 5, 6 people stood at the same place in the same city for about 3 years and just seen them keep getting richer.
Yeah,
like,
for sure.
It's like, what?
It's interesting. One of the questions on my list here was about rares. So obviously you guys are aware of how oddly important that is. Do you guys have a philosophy behind like how rares will be introduced into the game? Are there going to be like server birth rares, or are things going to be tied to events? Do you have some understanding? Because I feel like a lot of that in UO is honestly just an accident. Do you guys have some idea of how to do that on purpose?
We're 100% confident we're going to generate server birth rares without even thinking about it. But no, yeah, most of the ones in UO were accidents, I believe. It was a lot of them came about when, because
That's so true.
Our game is built, obviously because it's heavily inspired by Ultima Online, and we use a lot of the same physical items. We've run into a lot of the same problems in the sense that a lot of those rares were born when the world designers went around and did the world. And then when they were generating the interactable objects, they often left one behind the static objects. So a lot of the rares in UO were picked up by, you would pick up one of the manipulatable objects, and then before it snapped back saying you can't pick this up, there'd be one underneath it that you could actually take. So it's just ironic because we run into it sometimes as well. So we have got plans and we have got designs on how we're going to spawn, kind of, because you have daily rares and you have weekly rares and monthly rares and yearly rares. We've got implementations for things like that, and we're going to have like lots of Easter eggs for people to start collecting rares and trading rares. But I won't be surprised if we made a few by accident.
Is player trading? Sorry, I was talking to someone in game. Is player trading gonna be? Do you guys see that mostly being like bake standing and housing vendors, or do you plan on putting in like auction houses within towns or anything like that?
The consensus amongst the team right now is we don't particularly like auction houses. We've got a big we believe quite strongly in something we really want to make work, which was something that's never really worked before, is guild cities. I think one of the games that did that best would probably be like Star Wars Galaxies. They did guild cities really well. And it's something which particularly in this kind of game where you can freely place houses. And you've got a very open housing system. It's kind of similar with the how we've implemented the Hearth and Vitality as well. We really want to help facilitate the establishment of guild cities and have the game actually recognize guild cities. And that also plays into fast travel as well. So we have got a lot.
You're going to allow people to actually build like their player houses into cities that get officiated as cities, and then people can bind there and. Yeah,
but the plan is that we really want people to create these guild cities, and we really want to create a competitiveness between people who want to build guild cities. So we want people to create guild cities which have the most, the most useful shops, that have the most useful community, which have the most useful, bards, entertainers. We want that competitive element of guild cities, and we want to put in a sense of progression in guild cities, that guilds can aspire to build a city which can place a hearth, and which can place a banker, and which can place a teleportation tower. So that is one element of the game we're really going to be working on for beta, to because we dream one day of having that situation where at the character login screen instead of just choosing Valis or Elder Village or the Oasis to start a character. We really want guilds to build infrastructures within their own cities, but players can choose to start in those cities as well. It's just something we need to find the time to implement, basically.
That actually sounds amazing. I was not expecting to get an answer like that. So yeah, I really hope you guys implement something like that.
What did you ask about? You asked about shops. Yeah. So yeah, we want to
I was
focus.
just asking if there was going to be an auction house, and you guys are saying that players will be able to convert their houses into full-blown cities where people could even choose it as a starting location if they were new to the game.
Oh,
that's
we'd love to
amazing.
do that. I mean, that's like an aspiration of ours, but something that we're completely committed to doing is recognizing guild cities. And the start of recognizing guild cities is giving them hearths and giving them some system recognition. And part of that will be establishing a good hub, and a good hub will have good player vendors. So
God, that's too
yeah,
hard.
like I said, we want to focus more on the player cities than on auction houses.
Okay, cool. Let me see what next category of questions I have for you is. We've talked about a lot so far today.
Yeah. No, I'm good
yes.
for another. I think I've got another 15, 20 minutes.
Okay, cool. Well, people are going to be upset if I don't bring this up at least once. Stealing.
Okay.
What are the plans for stealing?
Stealing's heavily enshrined in how we finally deploy our notoriety. Because it's basically controlled by that. I mean, stealing can be really nasty. So the way in which we govern stealing falls under the bracket of how do we govern criminal actions, which just falls under. It's mechanically something that we've pretty much got ironed out. Like the actual act of stealing and stealing from players, it's not as much of a mechanical limitation as it is a fitting it in. So I think we've kept talking about stealing before each alpha, saying, are we gonna have stealing in this alpha, or are we gonna have it in this stage of alpha? I think once we get the notoriety system to a place where we talked about earlier, where we want the notoriety system to be one of complete freedom, but one which just stamps down heavily on criminal action rather than denies it from taking place. Once we can iron that out, I think we won't have a problem putting stealing in. It's just we can never not put enough thought into stealing, because once we add it and people are stealing from each other, it's difficult to row back on it. So
What's the structure of the notoriety system right now? I saw on my character sheet that I have murder counts. I'm assuming the penalties there are like you get kicked out of town, maybe the guards kill you, something like that. Are there any other drawbacks to going red, or if you lose notoriety from stealing, are there going to be drawbacks to that as well?
Yeah, well, right now it's very base implementation, and it's kind of what you'd expect. If you kill someone in high security, you'll get guard whacked. You won't get guard whacked immediately. Like, there's kind of a bit of room if you try really hard to try and kill someone before getting whacked, you can. But in most cases, you get guard whacked. And that'll turn you. We have a grey timer, so if you commit a criminal action, you'll get a grey timer. And if you kill a player, you will get a murder count. And then the murder counts expire over time. I think it's 20 hours a count or 24 hours a count. So it's penalized quite harshly, but it runs into that catch-all situation, which we're trying to avoid, which is, rudimentary punishments of single characters doesn't really solve a problem, because somebody can have a player killer character or a griefing character and do a lot of damage, receive a lot of kind of punishment, be it like temporary stat loss or something like that, but they're making us log out and jump on another character and do it again.
Right.
So yeah, the notoriety system we want to work on is going to be, it's something we're just scheming, and we'll have a good solution for it soon. But we want to try something that's not really been done before, and we want to try a really immersive solution to the problem, which it's just something we have to tweak our way towards, but we haven't really deployed what we think will be the solution to it yet. But the kind of way the security zone's playing right now is kind of accurate to where it might be. So people aren't exactly, there's not so much carnage in high security, and it'll probably be that similar kind of state.
Okay, yeah, stealing was always a tough one, even in classic UO, because they had to keep making it harder and harder on the thieves. Otherwise, people would literally just have like 2-day-old naked characters running around stealing with essentially no risk or drawback.
Yeah, it was kind of riddled with flaws, especially that you could. I mean, the one thing that always got me the most was stealing from people at the bank, and then having your partner in crime
Loot your corpse
loot
when
the
you got
loot the stolen items. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, it's
scam.
kind of funny. It's kind of funny, but
it's great when you're the one doing it, not so much when you've got some scoundrel with absolutely no risk, just all upside, just griefing you. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's part of the beauty of it. It's like it's what makes the game so great is when it's just a litany of unexpected things happening to you. Like it's what makes logging into these kind of games every day so fun.
Well, and there was something cool about how, like, somewhere like Britain or Vesper were known for there being just full of people who were likely to pick your pocket. But if you went to like U or Cove, one of these smaller cities, I don't know, each city in UO like really had a unique feel to it in that regard. There were actually cities that were like, that had high crime and cities that had low crime, and it wasn't really anything mechanical about that. It's just where people kind of naturally pick and chose to go based on how people around them acted.
Yeah, I mean, we were actually talking about the other day in the sense that you could go wherever you wanted to go, and it was primarily just based on how you felt about the world. Like I remember back when I used to play World of Warcraft and I was on the Horde, I always used to hang out in Thunderbluff, and people used to say to me like, why are you hanging out in Thunderbluff? And I was like, well, because it's cool. Like, it's so cool here. Don't you think it's cool? I'm like, yeah, but nobody's there. You're miles away from anywhere. You can't get anywhere quickly. Like, but you're actually damaging your gameplay experience being in Thunderbluff. And I was like, oh. But to me, that's how cities should be.
Yeah, they should have their own feel to them, and that's one. Every city in UO I think was so unique in that regard.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, right now we're batting on. Right now we have 2 starting cities, and we have 2 kind of. We've got 2 outposts in the other regions, and we've also got 2 smaller kind of hamlets. But we really, really we know we have to do better in that sense, and we know we really have to expand those places. So it's something that's a big priority to us to. Like I said earlier about the map in general, we really want to hammer home a real sense of character, and we really want to build a game around that sense of just freedom and location. Like, we really want freedom of location. I mean, fast travel kind of played into UO a little bit in allowing that freedom of location, because you could just bounce around. But I think with the right kind of, if we do the teleportation towers right, I think we can definitely still get there.
Do you guys have you mentioned something, you had some secret plans for some of the new regions. Do you guys have any kind of overall plans for the mystique or mystery of the game? Someone in chat just mentioned the City of Wind, where you had to get a certain amount of magery to enter, and I think there was a password or something too. Do you guys have plans for that kind of stuff in Aria that people are just gonna have to slowly figure out over time?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I've kind of been chopping at the bit to do that, and it's getting worse. But the main thing is, I mean, a lot of our testers will know. People should remember that it was only a year ago that Shards Online was a much smaller game. We looked around and we kind of saw what people were looking for, and then just one day it was right, we're making an MMO now, and then from then till now, I mean, just expanding everything, expanding the systems, all the work that's gone into it to getting it to the scale it's at now. It was huge. So right now, getting over we're kind of at the hump now where we've kind of done it now, or at least we're getting there. We're well on with getting there. So to us, we're all very, very eager to get in and start putting back in things like that. like putting back in Belore to the World, putting back
Thank
in
you.
all the small things which make these games really fun. All the small nuances and all the character and all the lore. I mean, the lore's important and the lore's not important because people tend to create their own kind of stories and their own kind of guilds. And back in the old days of UO, the lore kind of wrote itself, right?
Oh yeah,
It was the server
absolutely.
lore.
You had people. Yeah, we were just talking last time I was streaming Aria about how there was like people would have role playing guilds. People would dress up as orcs and running around like extorting gold from people who were traveling from town to town. You had guild battles that broke out. You'd have stories that would come up around that, and people that would betray their guilds and loot their friends' houses, and yeah, there was all kinds of crazy drama that just sprung up spontaneously.
Yeah, it's just another part of the magic when you ask someone where something is, and they say, oh, you have to go through the Orcwood. And then you say, like, oh,
Thank you.
why is it an Orcwood? And they say, oh, because the orcs live there. And you go, oh, okay. And then you go through the Orcwood, and the orcs are players, and you're like, what?
Yeah, it got its name from the players that inhabit it.
Yeah, it's like, why?
Not from the devs, but the players. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I've got some questions I think from chat that we can ask as we wrap up here. One that I got that's I've been curious about myself, kind of with any new MMO that comes out, is how do you guys see this game in the 2017 market? Because the market's much different than it was when UO came out. Do you guys think that now that the market is inundated with these kind of like World of Warcraft style players who are sort of used to hand holding, and do you think that people will understand what Aria is about? Do you think that they'll come into the game and complain that it's too hard, or complain that PvP needs to be safer, or do you guys kind of not care? Are you okay with being a smaller game? What do you just kind of answer that as you see fit, I guess?
Yeah. Well, it's a really strange time right now because
Look dope.
it's strange in the sense that when you consider how UO was when UO was UO back in the day, it was almost crying out not to be UO. Like it was crying out for EverQuest, and then EverQuest happened, and then a long series of events we get to where we are now. Yeah, this could be a long response. I mean, especially in the sense that when you consider playing playing MMOs about 10 years ago, we didn't play them for the gameplay. It was almost difficult to play MMOs in the early thousands because they were so. You had to have loads of patience to play them because they were inherently all broken. You were playing with like broken bits the whole time. So when you fast forward to today, there's a huge absence of broken. I mean, obviously there's a lot of indie games that get made now, which is kind of slowly kind of returning to playing games in more kind of rustic states. But I think people try so many different games now every day, particularly MMOs. People can try 5 MMOs in one day, and when they do that, as we all know, because we're all probably MMO gamers around here, or at least many of us will be, is that you can go through 5 MMOs in a game, 5 MMOs in a day, and they will all feel the same in a lot of ways. It's kind of like going through mobile games on your iPhone or something, because you can play different games, but they all kind of follow the same pattern. And I think it's opening up now. I think people who bounce around games now, like the MMOs of the last 10 years, now they're kind of landing on. There's a huge surge in games like Rust. There's a huge surge in games like PUBG. There's a huge surge in games where it's becoming popular to lose your stuff, and it's becoming popular to be made angry, and it's becoming popular to be involved in kind of new things, right? Because we've been playing the same things for a very long time. So I think when people...
You think difficulty is coming back into style, in a sense?
Yeah, and like being... Yeah, it definitely is. And it's almost like being an a-hole is coming back into style as well, which is... That went away for a long... You know what I mean. And it's... I guess people are bouncing around games, but we're entering a period now where people are going to start bouncing on our game, and people are going to start bouncing on a range of different style of games. And I think to this day we're still pretty much the only game, or at least the only people, many people I'm aware of are explicitly trying. But however our game mechanics end up, and however many specifics of our game end up, we're the only people trying to create the same freedom of world which you might have got in a game like UO in like 1999 or 1998. And I honestly think that's going to be compelling to people. It's a bit more different now when we're in alpha, but I think especially when we're into launch, and if we hit the nail on the head and actually realize that. I mean, our main goal is just to realize that scenario. And I think if players start jumping into a modern game and ask someone like, where's this, and they say, oh, they're through the Orc Forest, and they see people role-playing orcs again in a modern game, I think it's going to blow people away. Because
do you have some idea of what's, as far as the support you guys have gotten for Aria so far, do you have any way of measuring how many of these people are like old school nostalgic UO freaks, and how many of them are actually new people who have never seen something like this before?
Sure. Our main community, our early community was made up of a lot of players from, it was a very general mix early on between kind of Neverwinter Nights players. It was a mix of, we definitely had UO players, and it was a broad spectrum mix, basically. As we've made the switch to an MMO, and specifically now that we've come out and said that this is going to be a standalone MMO game in addition to a customizable game, the amount of UO has definitely gone up. So it's hard to say really, because the last time we did like a survey of who was UO and who wasn't, it was mostly mixed. But I'd say now that we're getting a much stronger recognition from former UO players, because former UO players are everywhere. Like when it's kind of it's a difficult group to market to, because it's like they got shot out of a cannon. They're just all over the place because there's nothing really picking them up. There's no game really picking up.
We've been wandering through the desert, man. I mean, it's like it's been the last few years, the last 10 years even. It's like, where did we go?
Absolutely. And what makes it even more of a stark point is especially when I've run into old friends from UO, I found them in the weirdest games, like just all over the place. And there's nothing that's really drawn people together. I mean, there's been points over the years. I mean, like Darkfall was one point that drew a lot of them back. Albion's another one. There's a lot of them, people came back and played Albion. But I mean, other than a few exceptions, like people who have played an MMO like this are just everywhere. And we just don't want them to lose hope, because there's hope.
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of old school Tibia fans really latch onto this game as well, and I had no idea Tibia was even a thing when I was younger, but it seemed to be kind of like a geographical thing. Like some parts of the world had UO and some parts had Tibia, and for whatever reason, and it seems like there were some other games from that era that just gave you that kind of freedom, and people see that's happening again now with Aria.
Sure, yeah. I mean, RuneScape kind of, I guess old school
RuneScape
kind of falls under the same thing. It's a shame, and I always wanted to play Tibia, because it kind of, didn't they base it on Ultima 7, I think. It's kind of like yeah, I think it was based on Ultima 7, and I always kind of wanted to get into it, but having played UO, it was always a bit too much of a, I don't know. But now, Tibia sounds like a great game. It just evaded me.
Yeah, same here. All right, well, let's see if maybe we have a couple more chat questions, and then we can probably wrap up. People were asking about factions. I think you guys do have something like that, and I assume that there will be guild wars. Do you guys plan on having incentivized competitive PvP, i.e. like will factions or guild wars actually have some kind of reward at the end of them, or are they mainly just going to be for people to have something to do?
Yeah, absolutely. It's to give a bit of a hint, it's kind of why we're a little bit quiet about the upper regions.
I see.
We will have guild wars, and we already do have a faction system. well, not so much faction system. It's kind of right now it's kind of similar to Chaos Order. I stay away from a faction thing because a lot of our players are from UO and like factions had like stat loss and things, but it's basically just like a consensual red versus blue style faction system. So yeah,
Where
we have
you
those.
opt in for PvP, and then there's some potential rewards tied to being
You
successful.
opt in, and you can't leave immediately upon trying to leave, obviously, because people game that. So it's like an opt-in consensual PvP system. But we have scheming plans on how we're going to create quite influential guild conflicts and faction conflicts. So we've definitely got our eyes on that.
And then we've got some people in chat who really want to know about Bards, myself included. My favorite build to probably the first character I ever actually finished in UO, we'll put it that way, was a Bard back when I was like 9 or 10 years old. So I think you guys have some plans of doing that in Aria, yeah?
Oh, absolutely. For anyone who's not familiar with this carnation of what a bard is, the most fascinating and fun thing about a bard is they are the one character which you could take to extremely dangerous places, and they could provoke creatures to attack each other. So it was kind of like just insanely fun taking this lone character out to somewhere he shouldn't be, and just provoking mobs and trying to make money and trying to get out alive of the money. It was like kind of like doing player versus monster in hard mode. And yeah, we've actually got 2 carnations of a bard planned. The first carnation being the provocateur, who's going to be provoking creatures to attack one another. And we've also got the second carnation of bard, which is it's going to be more of a social character and more of a roleplay character and more of a it's going to be the start of hopefully what we hope will be several different skills you can pick up which have just got a social use. And we did kind of take a leaf out of Star Wars Galaxy's book there, where they had like social skills, which actually had a direct influence in the game and helped promote hubs within the game and promote kind of local communities within areas within the game. So yeah,
Do you have like an example of that? Because I'm not quite familiar with what you mean.
Okay. Well, the example of it, I guess, in the Star Wars Galaxy's implementation was in their cantinas. Star Wars Galaxies did it with buffs, which isn't something that the basic gist of it was if you visited a cantina in Star Wars Galaxies, you could visit a dancer and sounds weird when you say that. You could visit a dancer or like an entertainer, and they would heal your wounds suffered for when you were damaged, and they would bring your character back to like kind of full use. But the reason why they were really important in Star Wars Galaxies was they gave you like game-breaking buffs. But we're not going to do those. But yeah, the idea is that of just basically social characters. So, but when you're playing, you'll see in your top left you've got a vitality bar. Eating good quality cooked food will decrease your chances of becoming hungry. It will decrease your hunger, which slows down your loss of vitality. But if you die, if you do a lot of strenuous activity, like if you mine for prolonged periods of time, or if you try and macro the game or something, it's going to hit your vitality. So bards are going to be the people who, in the inns across Aria, and obviously later on in guild cities, once we allow guild cities to work up towards having a half, they will be the thing which will bring you back to full use until 100% vitality.
So the hearth is almost like a stand-in for what the role that bards will fulfill later on.
Yes, the half will be the requirement for a bard to engage in being a bard, but the half on its own won't do anything.
I see.
So it's a really weird thing to explain, but when you were traveling around in games like Star Wars Galaxies, and you could go to different planets and different cities, whenever you went to the cantina, you just found a hub of people, and you found people who would just, you get the most sociable characters, the most interesting, funny people who play these characters, and it just really brings the world to life. It's just great.
Yeah, it's one of those things that's difficult to explain, but I can totally see what you're saying. Like, knowing what I know of the role-playing scene in UO, like I could absolutely think of tons of people who would fulfill that and make it like fun and interesting in a way that you wouldn't expect.
Oh, the way people start competing, because the only way to raise your entertainment skills or your barding skills in those situations is to attract the punters to like listen to you entertain, and it's just hilarious.
Yeah, it's the amount of like player-driven content you can get out of that is just
Yeah, and
supreme.
in any situation where the character makes the conscientious choice to help another character doing what he's doing, and I don't know, it's all about love and goodwill and social gameplay, which we're just kind of all about it.
And I assume you guys are gonna have orc masks and other sort of costumes that people can adorn to differentiate themselves and play that role.
Oh, we couldn't put that PC gamer quote on our website if we weren't if we weren't gonna do that.
Excellent.
Yeah, we've got lots of silly things and very, you know, we're looking forward to the day that we can sit down and say, great, the combat's great, game's great, the map's great. Now let's make, jester hats and pumpkin pies and stuff.
Absolutely. Cool, man. Well, I think that's probably a good place to wrap. I know you got to head off pretty soon. I really
Yeah.
appreciate you taking the time to. I think we talked for almost 2 hours, so I really appreciate you hanging out and answering questions. A lot of people have been asking me about this game, and there's a lot of stuff I've been confused about as well. So this is really painted. Oh, I just got ported somewhere. This has really painted a beautiful picture for me of what this game could be, and I'm a lot more. I feel a lot more invested now than I did even a few days ago. So yeah, thanks for taking the time, and hopefully I can put this up on YouTube and get some people to see it and start to spread the word about what you guys are doing.
Yeah, well, thanks so much for having me. It's great. It's great talking about the game. I mean, it's especially great talking about it to someone who. Did you just get Portal? Yeah, you did. It's great talking about someone who, it's just great reminiscing. And it's great to have the opportunity to do it. And like Supreme said, we're 100% crowdfunded. So I mean, every penny that comes to us just helps us do it. I mean, we wouldn't be here having this conversation, talking about this game, or talking about the future of this game without it.
So what should people
It's
do if they want to support you? Just head to Legends of Aria and pick up a Founders Pack.
Yeah, absolutely. Heading to legendsofAria.com and pledging is like a direct support for us, and it's just what keeps us going. I mean, other than that, just just talk about the game, enjoy the game, give us feedback on the game, help us make it the way that it needs to be. And yeah, that's about it. And yeah, thanks for having me. It's been fun.
Cool. And yeah, make sure Legends of Aria has a pretty active Discord too. So I'll
We're
put a
talking
link.
about way too much here.
Yeah, I will. I'll put a link in Twitch right now, and then on YouTube later if you're watching this on YouTube for the Legends of Aria Discord. And then if you're interested in my community, I will be creating a Legends of Aria channel as well. So those of you who are going to be playing this game, since I'm definitely going to be sticking around and learning more about it, maybe we can go around and dress up as orcs and cause some trouble. So.
All right, man. Well, thanks again, and yeah, we can definitely think about doing this again sometime in the future. And yeah, everyone have a good night, and thanks for listening.
Awesome. Take care. So that concludes the Q&A with the devs. To summarize my thoughts on all of this, first of all, I'm quite happy with the fact that Mifon was willing to sit down with me for a full 2 hours. And if you do join the Aria Discord, you can see the developer interaction with the community, in addition to interviews like this one, is just very, very good across the board. This is important because a big danger to making a game like Aria, and MMOs in general, is a lack of willingness to listen to the players. But this does not seem to be an issue from what I've seen so far from the team at Citadel Studios. Regarding the answers to actual questions, after years of disappointing MMOs, I am of course skeptical about the execution of some of these things, but I found the vision behind these answers to be very thoughtful. When it comes to the execution meeting the vision, it's partially on us as players to be part of the experience and give our feedback. So let's take advantage of the fact that Citadel is actually listening to its players. I think many UO players, including myself, will have knee-jerk reactions to changes to combat particularly, but if we're really objective about it, classic UO, as amazing as the combat was, had essentially zero build variety. And it's not enough in 2017 to just make a clone of a 20-year-old game. Some things have to evolve, and the concept behind these evolutions is very smart. I particularly like the trade-offs between staying power and chasing power when it comes down to players' decisions regarding how they will allocate stats to things like will, wisdom, and agility. I'll be keeping a close eye on this game as development continues, and I hope to get another Q&A with these guys maybe sometime around the Steam launch later this year. So thank you guys for watching, and as always, I will see you next time.